Hello everybody, this is Fire Nibbler and I've been getting a lot of requests to make a YouTube tutorial series on learning ModPE, so this is kind of what I'm starting out with here. Um, Really what we're going to be learning in this episode is we're going to be learning about basic hook functions, you'll learn about that later, in ModPE, and just really the basics of how all this works. So yeah, let's get started. First off, each one of these hook functions, what they're everything inside of this and this is going to happen when this hook function is executed. So use item every time you tap a block. All of the code in this area, not that area, all of the code in this area here will get executed or run. So let's say if I in use item, if I put I don't know, print hi, every time you tap a block, a little print dialog is going to say hi, or I can change this to client message, which will send a little chat box message. All of the programming that ModPE is done in is JavaScript, and so every time you make a JavaScript file, you have to end it in .js. One second, let me show you that. See right up here, .modpe. It always ends in .js. That kind of shows that it's a JavaScript file, so that it can be run by Block Launcher. So what we're going to start out with is each one of these hook functions. All the code inside of them is run every time. All the code inside of this is run really every time it happens. So pro cmd, every time someone types in a command like slash blah, then that means that all the code in pro cmd will be run. Same thing for attack hook, every time you hit something, or death hook. Mod tick is really a special one because this one is run 20 times a second. So really, if you want something run constantly throughout the game, this is where you would put it. And then there's also new level and leave game, and a bunch of other hooks which we'll cover later. But for now, I'm just going to be going over the basics of how this works. So inside of use item, let's say you're making a mod and you want to, and every time someone taps a block with, say, a stick, which a stick's ID is 280, then you want it to say this is a stick in the client message. So what you do is first you have to make an if statement, which is saying if whatever is going on in here happens. So you say if item ID equals, you put 2 equal sign, otherwise it'll be like an error. And the item ID you see up here, these are all the custom variables for this. So you use item ID, and every time this is run, item ID always equals whatever item the player is currently holding. Same thing for X, Y, and Z. X is the X coordinates that they tap, Y and Z, you know what those are. And then the block ID is the block ID of whatever block you tap, and then the side returns whichever side you tap. So item ID equals 280, and then you put the curly brackets in so that all the code that you want, if the item ID is 280, will be run in here. You put client message, and then you put them inside of little quotation marks to show that it's like text. This is a stick. So with this code, every time you tap the ground or just any block, it'll always tell you this is a stick because it's getting this ID. Now, if you want it to be anything except this, so you want to see if it's a stick, and if it's not a stick, you want something else to run, then you just put else. So if else and then you put client message. So I'll just copy this. This is not a stick. And so every time you tap a block with a stick, you'll see in the chat box, this is a stick, and every time you tap it without a stick, then it'll say this is not a stick. So this is just really the basics of how it's all set up. You can find a lot of other functions, like for instance, if it's a stick, instead of saying client message, instead of it sending you a little chat box message, then what it'll do is you could do entity dot set x, and so the first parameter or little object that you put in here is get player ent. So this is just returning the player, so every time you use this, it's just referencing the player. And so you put get player ent there, and then you could just put x, because that's the x variable here. So now every time you tap a stick, it'll always teleport you to the same x coordinates as you just tapped, but it'll keep your y and z coordinates. So yeah, this is pretty much just the basics of my ModPE. It'll be coming out the next tutorial. It should be covering making your own functions and a little bit of variables, so that you could try and make more dynamic or useful code than this. So yeah, see you around.